Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about The Girl in the Tower Part 5. This is the story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Now before we get started with our story, I wanted to make a little side note about one of the friends that Gypsy Rose had actually been in contact with around the time that her and her mother had gotten the house. After they would move in, Gypsy would actually befriend Aaliyah Woodlancey. And Woodlancey was someone that lived fairly close to Gypsy, and this would be someone that Gypsy would often confide in about a lot of just day-to-day things. And there's not much that's known about what Aaliyah knew about Gypsy. I don't think she knew exactly everything that was going on between Gypsy and Claudine. But I do believe that she believed that Gypsy had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. So what we will be discussing today, it probably kind of made her scratch her head a little bit and just be kind of confused as to just things that Gypsy was saying. But what I find very shocking is how Aaliyah did not know that Gypsy was perfectly fine. But then again, we don't know how well that Claudine had trained Gypsy, and from the moment she was a little girl, she was trained to lie, so she probably made it very convincing. But I digress. So without further ado, let's recap with our story. When we last left off, we had talked about how Gypsy had tried to run away from home around 2011, and she had began reconnecting with a friend she had met at a sci-fi convention. Well, upon entering the home, she would not stay there long because this supposed friend would actually have other mutual friends of Claudine, and Claudine would actually find the man and drive down there and begin waving her papers saying that her daughter was still 16, and if she did not come home with him that instant, that she would call authorities. The man did not know any of this, and so he stepped down and he allowed Claudine to take her home. Gypsy would say in a later interview that as soon as they got home, Claudine would take a hammer and begin smashing her computer and her cell phone with the hammer. And after she had destroyed her computer and cell phone, she would turn around and look at Gypsy and say, "If you ever try that again, I'll smash your fingers with a hammer." At this point, Claudine would board up all the windows in the house so no one could see inside the house, nor could Gypsy look outside. She would also take a pair of handcuffs and a dog leash and actually tie Gypsy to the bed for about 2 weeks, where she would actually starve Gypsy. After she was done doing this, she would walk over to where Aaliyah lived at and would begin cussing her out for corrupting her innocent daughter. After she would do that, she would go in and file for her daughter and claim her to be incompetent. And she would actually look at Gypsy on multiple occasions, look her in the face and say, "If you ever try to go to the police, no one will believe you because you are retarded." It is said that shortly after this, that an anonymous tip would be made to the police. Most speculate that it is Aaliyah that would make the anonymous tip that someone was abusing Gypsy at home. The police would drive to Claudine and Gypsy's home, to where Claudine would just begin waving her pictures or her papers, and say that nothing was wrong. And because Claudine was the legal guardian and the mother of Gypsy, and no other files had ever been claimed before, and there were no signs of abuse in the home, or the fact that Gypsy would deny any claims of abuse, the police had no case, so they would just walk away. But this would also give Gypsy fears if she would able to escape her mother. Because Gypsy had no computer or cell phone then, the only way of contacting anyone at this point was to sneak off after her mom would fall asleep and get on her computer and begin chatting on people on social media. At around 2012, she would actually create an account on Christian Mingle, and she would make a profile picture and would make her account and put a caption on the dating site that she was looking to get married and settle down and have a family. There she would meet 23 Nicholas Godejohn. And Nicholas was looking for a relationship as well. It is said that when they first began messaging each other, that the messages were fairly tame for the most part. They would just engage in conversations like, what are you looking for? What kind of a wedding would you like? When are you planning on getting married? Do you want to have kids? How many kids would you like to have? And so on. After they began to get to know each other, their attraction and desire for each other became more intense. And it is at this point that Gypsy began telling Nick that she wasn't exactly as disabled as she claimed to be, and began telling Nick about the fact that she was perfectly fine and that she wasn't handicapped and she was perfectly normal, and her mom had made her lie about these things. Nicholas would in turn would tell Gypsy that he too had a mental disorder and was autistic, and would begin telling Gypsy that not only that, but he had multiple personalities, and that he had believed that he used to be an assassin named Victor in a former life, and because he had multiple personalities, he was actually looking for a girlfriend who had multiple personalities as well, so that each one of their personalities would have a girlfriend. Gypsy would actually entertain this idea and began creating different aliases and personalities for Nicholas. Nicholas would then go and tell Gypsy that he was very much into BDSM and was very interested in her being interested in BDSM as well. And Gypsy would go along with it and say that she was. And Nicholas would actually send Gypsy not only videos of BDSM, but would actually write her scripts to read in front of Nicholas so he could find climax.
Use one card that I have over you.
The video you just saw was one of those multiple videos that Gypsy had actually recorded at her home and sent to Nicholas. In this one, she is under the premise or personality trope of a person she created called Ruby, which was a dark persona that Nicholas's dark persona, Victor, actually liked a lot. And Ruby was a very, very dark and sadistic woman. Nicholas and Gypsy would begin talking very frequently over the social media platform Facebook. And because Gypsy had to sneak off and use her mom's computer in order to talk to Nicholas, she had to actually go and create multiple accounts so that her mom wouldn't figure out what was going on. And aside from making all these multiple accounts, it came to a point in their brief relationship that Gypsy and Nicholas had decided that they were soulmates and they were going to be together forever. And Nicholas, who was enthralled by Gypsy, would actually go and say there's nothing that he would not do for her, and he would protect her from anything. To where Gypsy would actually ask Nicholas, even my mother. And Gypsy would say this is where the conversation kind of started from there. But before they had got into these plans, they had begun discussing plans in a way so they could actually meet and be a couple. Because it has always been Gypsy's plan to not only find a significant other, but start a family and have the support from her mother to get married and so on. So Gypsy and Nicholas would actually create a 3-stage plan. The first one would be to introduce Nicholas to her mother, and they actually get along and be supportive. The second plan, which would be called Plan B, is if nothing else failed, they would kill her mother. And Plan C is if Plan A did not work, they would actually try to get pregnant so that they would always be together.